Hey designers, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make 4 advanced modesty panels. Let's get into this. These are the pieces for method 1. The modesty panel will be under the bias tape of the corset. Here we have the pattern, the main fabric, and the lining. The first thing we're going to do is notch the main fabric right here and right over here. This indicates where to start the design lines. There are 2 ways to do this. For method 1 and 2, I will show you the tape method. And for method 3 and 4, I will show you another way to do it. This is called a masking tape. It's an easy to tear paper tape. It won't leave your fabric sticky. Take the masking tape and put it on the 2 notches. Start from the top down to the bottom like this. Here's one side. And here is the other side. After that, put the lining right side to right side and sew it a 1/2 inch here and here. Leave the top and bottom so that we can turn the fabric inside out. The next step is to iron the fabric, but be careful how you're doing this. Start from the back. You don't really want to do it from the front because you don't want the tape to stick to the fabric. So just iron it on the sides at the front. From there, stitch down in between the 2 tape lines. Once you do that, then you can peel the tape off like this. I like how it doesn't make your fabric sticky. Now you're going to sew a 3/8 bias tape on top. Put the boning inside those 2 lines you just sewed. Then close the bottom with a 3/8 bias tape. When it comes to advanced modesty panels, I do not use plastic boning. I only use the steel boning. The only time I use the plastic one is when I'm doing a basic modesty panel. Is plastic boning bad? No, it's not. It's really about how you want your designs to look and feel. Let's talk about the eyelets. There are different sizes from different companies. In this video, I am using the 1/4 inch Draping pack that's laying on the table. I also have a 5/16 eyelets and a 10mm grommets. Here is where we're going to put the eyelets, right underneath the bias tape. As you can see, this modesty panel is designed to go underneath the 3/8 inch bias tape of the corset back. Also, the eyelets have to line up like this so that you can lace your corset correctly. And here is your final look for method 1. This is called a stiffened floating modesty panel. It's lightweight compared to the other methods. Let's get into method 2. This method has 2 versions. Here's the first version. Let me show you how I made the pattern. The first thing is to measure the corset gap. For me, it's 3 1/4, which is 1 5/8 on both sides. This is where you're going to put the corset. And from there, you start to curve it all the way to the bottom of the corset line. Be careful how you're curving it, because if you do it wrong, the bias tape is going to give you a problem. Try to curve it like this. The first thing we're going to do is take the pattern and put it on the main fabric and start notching the 3 lines on the top for the boning. Same thing for the bottom. You have 1, 2, and 3. Let's start putting the tape on the 3 notch lines. You will see later on why we should not use this tape when it comes to a design that has a lot of lines. The first line from your 3/8 inch line is a 1/2 inch. That will be for your 1/4 inch eyelets. Then from there, make a 3/8 inch line for your boning. Write down your notes and then do the same thing for the other side. This is how it's going to look. Next, put the lining in the back. From there, sew from here all the way around and stop right here. You need this open to put your boning. Next, sew in between the 2 tapes right here. Then sew these lines and these lines. Here's the front and the back. These are the 3 lines right here. This is the reason why I said the tape method is not good for a design that has too many small lines. It's because when it's time to peel the tape off, it will leave an ugly mess that you have to clean up. I will show you another way to do it in the next method. After that, put your boning inside the 3 sections, then sew the bias tape all around. From there, put your eyelets in between the boning in the middle, but it has to be underneath the bias tape like that. Also, the eyelets on the corset has to line up with the Modesty panel on the top and the bottom. And here is the final look for the first version of Method 2. This is also called a stiff and float in Modesty panel. It's a little more sturdy than Method 1. Let's get into the second version. You will need a 1/2 inch space in the middle. That's 1/4 on each side of your center front. We're going to use a 3/8 inch ribbon. Put the lining in the back and sew 1/4 all around the whole thing. After that, sew in between the 2 tape lines in the middle and peel the tape off. This version will have no boning. Take your ribbon and put it in the middle. From there, you're going to go down 1/4 from the bias tape and sew a line. Then go down 1.5 inch and sew another line. Repeat the same thing for the bottom. Then from there, sew this part closed. The ribbon will go inside here and here, like this. Here is the final look for the second version of Method 2. It's also called a float in Modesty panel, but it's not sturdy at all. It just has interfacing inside. It will still make your corset look cute though. Next is Method 3. In this method, we are not using the tape method. This time we're going to write on the back of the main fabric's interfacing with a pencil. Write down a 1/2 inch, 3/8, 1/4, and 3/8 on both sides. Then write 3/8 on the top and bottom. The next step is to write the X's. Let's start on this line right here and go all the way down to this line. Then from this line, go all the way down to this line. After that, go from this line all the way to this line. Do the same to the other line. When you finish writing the X's, there will be a triangle in the middle that you need to avoid when you're sewing it, or you can sew at each corner. I usually just erase the triangle so I don't make a mistake and sew through it. Take this to the sewing machine and sew the X to each corner. Then stop and pivot to the other side. Take your time sewing it because it will show on the front of your fabric. When you finish doing that, put your lining right side to right side of your fabric. Sew a 1/2 inch on both sides. Leave the top and bottom open. Also, when you sew this, sew it on this side so you can sew on the seam allowance line. If you sew it on the lining side, the lines will not be exact. Unfortunately, when you turn the fabric inside out, you will have to sew the X one more time. But this time, sew the X on top of the main fabric so it goes through the lining. After that, sew 3/8 on each side for the boning tunnel. When you're sewing on top of the stitch, take your time. Sometimes the sewing machine likes to do its own thing, like for an example, jump off the stitch. So just keep that in mind when you're sewing. From there, sew the bias tape on top, then put the boning inside the tunnels and close the bottom with the bias tape. When you put the boning inside the tunnels, it will lay on top of each other in the middle of the X. Here is the final look for Method 3. It's also called a float in Modesty panel. This one is sturdier than Method 1 and 2. If this video is being helpful to you, I would love it if you would give it a like so it can spread to more people. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Now let's get into Method 4. The first thing we're going to do is notch the fabric from the pattern. Then write 3/8, 1/4, and 3/8 on top of your fabric. Then do the same thing for the bottom. When it comes to the boning tunnels, I sometimes make it 5/16, but most of the time I make it 3/8. This part right here is the ribbon section. It's a 1/2 inch. So we're going to start by putting a line from the notch lines, but from this line to this line. Then put 1/4 on one side of that line and then put another 1/4 on the other side. That will be your 1/2 inch ribbon section. From there, put 3 lines of 3/8 on both sides, and that will be your boning tunnels. Take this to the sewing machine and sew the following lines. Here, here, these 3 boning lines, this line, skip that line and go to this line, then sew the other boning lines. Sew this line and this line. Do not sew this line. And do not sew this line. It will look like this once you sew it. This is how it's going to look in the front. Next, take your lining and put it right side to right side and sew here and here. Leave the top and bottom open. Next, turn your fabric inside out and iron it so it looks neat. Then take this back to the sewing machine and sew on top of this stitch and all of these stitches. This is how it's going to look in the front, and this is the back. Next up is the boning. Cut them to its sides and put them in the 6 tunnels. From there, sew this line to close the tunnels. Get 2 more pieces for here and here. Put them in these tunnels and sew them closed on this line and this line. Next, cut a piece of ribbon and sew 1/4 here and here. This is so that it doesn't move. Then divide the length of this into 3. Here is an example. My length is 9 inches. I divided it into 3 and the answer was 3 inches. So I put 3 inches here, 3 inches here, and 3 inches here. Once you do all that, then you can put your bias tape on the top and bottom. And this is your final look for method 4, guys. This is the strongest Modesty panel. This design makes it hard for the Modesty panel to bunch up in the middle. If you haven't seen my basic Modesty panel video, you can check it out here. Go ahead and click on that, and I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to practice, practice, practice. Bye, everybody.